Yeah, thank you. I think that Pope Benedict has a very broad vision of the different types of women's participation in the church. And in fact, of all the popes, he has women in some of the highest positions in the church very quickly. A number of female theologians have been placed into quite considerable leadership roles in the church very quickly. One is a Salesian theologian who's been given a very significant role. Also, the person conducting that investigation of religious life is a religious sister herself. So this is the first time it hasn't been a cardinal. It's actually a religious sister conducting, a mother. She's a senior woman in her congregation who is conducting these interviews, and she has written to every single community in the United States and gathered all the material and information. So she's achieving an extraordinary task that I'm sure a cardinal would need 500 secretaries to do. So she's a woman of considerable ability and organisational skill. Benedict himself also has had women advisors working in his women who are working in unusual communities. One of them is the Schoenstatt community. Now they are sisters who either wear habits or don't. Some religious women are their expression of life is very unusual and very fluid, and so quite often the dispute about religious life has been about whether sisters wear habits or they don't wear habits. That's the way it's, but that visitation, in other words, saying the Pope's only in favour of women who wear habits. Well, that's just not true, because the women who work in his household, two of them at least, are members of a community who are very fluid in the way they live their religious life. I mean, they definitely have a religious life, but it's not just a conventional life. And Benedict himself has worked with women in this capacity quite a bit. So I suspect that he probably has, if anything, perhaps even a more revolutionary idea of how religious sisters might live their lives, but at the same time affirming the traditional communities that have given us so much depth in their feminine genius, that is, like the Benedictine sisters, the Carmelites and so on, to re-establish their role and recognise who they are and really hear what they have to say. One of the reasons this investigation took place is because many of the religious communities that kind of broke down, and I don't mean that necessarily as a criticism of those women, but many of their communities dispersed. There were individual women left in very difficult situations with no real contact with their community. It happened a little bit in male orders, but much more so in women's orders. So there was a much greater sense of a loss of identity, a search for a charism. And I think that the investigation is partly to try and pick up even those women who live on the fringes of their community, to give them a voice. And I think that's a very new feminist thing to do, to try and incorporate their voice. It will be interesting to see the reports from that, and I think it would be perhaps very helpful for religious sisters in Australia to read those reports as well. I hope I've answered that question, but that's what I know about it.
Thanks, Hannah. It's been an amazing talk. On Saturday morning, I gave a brief interview. I interviewed a community radio for a friend. The theme was actually masculinity. Theme tonight. But it just got me thinking during the weekend and then tonight on your reflections. My experience, lived experience in the workforce and in the public sector, dealing with women who just, I don't know, you could say that it's on a big power game, they're just really out there to make their name for themselves. And being a Christian man, obviously, I don't just want to shoot them down and crush their spirit or whatever. But at the same time, I, as a man, don't want to be trampled on. You just see a lot of, there's a whole thing of things, I guess, perhaps some negative aspects of femininity or masculinity. Obviously, femininity is primarily an extremely positive thing for masculinity. But I was just talking with someone tonight, and I don't know how you would deal with women in the workforce who have just got that power first, without crushing their spirit or whatever, help build them up in a way that's going to be constructive for everyone. I don't know that.
I don't quite know. The first thing I'd say is be yourself. Be yourself. Because very often people present that face because they're insecure, or they feel maybe you're going to, maybe they've had a situation where most of their relationships with men have been simply competitive ones. There's nothing wrong with a bit of competition, but in the workforce, but there's also got to be justice and respect and other values as well. And the question is, how do you foster that respect? And I think you foster respect by giving respect, you know. Sometimes just listening to somebody and maybe asking how they are, or noticing things about them that are positive, can be a sign that, oh, he's not just out there to put me down or make jokes about me or whatever. So be yourself is the first thing I'd say. I don't know if anyone else has got a comment about that, but my thought is try to be yourself, and your instinct to try and build a person up and not knock them down is a good thing. But be strong. Don't say, oh, I'm going to be weedy because this person's a bit scary. I think one of the big problems at the moment is men are really scared of women. I had a lot of that history. You know, you see someone and they go, oh, they're scared, they've gone. I think it's a big problem in the church too. I think men are very scared of women. They don't know how to be. They don't know what the rules are anymore.
Thanks, Anna. I can't see you.
Oh, hi there, Robert.
I'll extend on Anna's comments. Perhaps it was me who we were speaking to earlier. I guess from a male's perspective, and where Andrew was heading was the women come into the workforce, and it's as though they need to prove themselves. And they might go above and beyond what a male would do to prove himself, because he might see that he's wrong, but he might see that he doesn't need to prove himself. But a woman might feel as though she needs to make a point. She's either a businesswoman or she's doing what she's doing. But from a male's perspective, working in that environment, I guess it would be unchristian and politically incorrect just to shoot them away because they're under a woman, or because they're just trying to stand for themselves. So it's difficult for a male to work with women who are really trying to prove themselves and keep that balance in the workplace. I guess it's also difficult because men and women are very different. And we might learn a lot of things at university, but it's not how to negotiate with women who are really trying to make their big mark in the world. So we were just discussing the challenges about that. How would you...
That's a really interesting one, because I suppose an experience I've had is men who are quite scared, and you've got to sort of say, come on, you can talk to me, you know, I'm pretty tough, I'll stand up to it, it's okay. And maybe you're assuming that you can't be more straightforward with them than you can.
I guess we don't want to be disrespectful.
No, but be frank. As you would be to another colleague, say, hey, you know, that's just way unnecessary. You don't have to do that to get the boss's attention, or whatever the thing is. And the women often are doing that because they've been told you've got this much time to compete in, whereas men perhaps don't see their time as limited between having children or having marriages or partners or whatever the whole situation is. So and also the way men focus is much more in a linear fashion, it tends to be. So when they get into work, they're at work, and when they're at home, they're at home. Women probably are working, also conscious of all the things they've got to do at home, and trying to compete and do all that, and getting a bit psycho as they go. I mean, you do, don't you? I do. Try and do 100 things at once. And sometimes my husband will just say, which bag are you going to take? And I'm saying, and you're trying to multitask. And so I think that women are pushing themselves very, very hard. There may be some financial reasons why they're doing that. There may also be a script in their head that they've been told at school or at college or by one of their mentors. You've just got to go at it. You've got to take no prisoners. Da da da. And I think it's good to speak to them as adults and say, hey, that's just not the way we're going to have a good collegial relationship. Treat them as adults. Say, not as aliens, but treat them as adults and say, look, this is, if you want to be, you know, we're in this workplace, if they're there, they should be able to take it. Now, the sad thing is where you might find the political structure in the workplace makes that very, very difficult. And there's still equal opportunity for men. You know, keep remembering that you've got your own dignity and your own rights as well. And not to feel that you can't make a complaint if someone's, for instance, harassing you, which is happening. Women who harass men think that they can do it because the balance has always been the other way. No, they can't. And I think men are a little bit unsure about how all that works, but that's partly because they don't know what to do next. And I'm not intimate with the details of your workplace, but that's my suggestion. Just shoot from the hip. Shoot from the hip.